The industry-wide debate about how pervasive and deep-seated vaccine skepticism is in America got an unexpected jolt last week. A poll conducted by Public First on behalf of Politico analyzed the sentiment around vaccines in the U.S. It also explored the partisan divide and suggested that one of HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s top priorities is gaining traction. The poll's top finding was that 46% of adults believe the facts on vaccine are still up for debate, and it's damaging to enforce their uptake. It made headlines far and wide. We even included it as our key data point for the next morning's edition of the prescription newsletter. Yet not everyone has bought into Politico's findings, with some even expressing skepticism about the skepticism. In a pointed op-ed published in Stat News a few days later, physician Dan Higgins argued that Politico's poll was badly worded and made vaccine skepticism look more common than it is, which he said is dangerous. Considering Kennedy is more than a year into his tenure as HHS Secretary, using both his bully pulpit and regulatory levers to impact federal vaccine policy, the focus on vaccines remains at a fever pitch. More than 6 years after the start of the COVID-19 pandemic and the latest, most galvanizing iteration of the anti-vaccine movement, the importance of marketing and communications around vaccines cannot be understated. For this week's feature interview, pharma editor Lecia Bushak sits down with Tim Lee, the chief commercial officer at Invivyd. The two discuss the shift among vaccine manufacturers post-COVID, why clear, science-based messaging can change the narrative, and what role monoclonal antibodies can play as an alternative to traditional vaccines. Then after the feature interview, you'll get to hear from us following our win at the 72nd Neal Awards, as well as a few conversations from our recent Transform conference.
Tim, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, of course, Lecia. Thank you very much for having me.
And I think this is a really important topic for our listeners, and I'm excited to dive into this with you. But before we begin, could you give our audience a little bit of a primer on Invivyd and just tell us a little bit about the company and the pipeline and what you do?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So coming to you from New Haven, Connecticut, right down the street from Yale, Invivyd is really a biotech pharmaceutical that's focused on developing best-in-class antibody therapies. And we're looking across multiple viral threats. Our goal is to provide protection and really define what can be next in helping people stay well. And so our pipeline is pretty broad, and our execution around that has started with COVID, but we're looking at other things. And if you see our work, we've looked into long COVID, RSV, measles, and more. So we're really excited to bring some of these breakthroughs of our science into the world.
Yeah. And, it's been almost a little over 6 years since COVID officially started, which is pretty crazy to think about. But we've seen a lot of things change since then. Obviously the vaccines played a big role in the COVID pandemic. But since then, especially in the last year with the new administration and the current HHS under the helm of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., there's been a bit of a shift where there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy and mistrust around vaccines. So where does the vaccine industry stand right now in 2026, sort of like 6 years after a golden era during COVID?
Yeah, I think when you say a golden era of COVID, Operation Warp Speed and the way that the country was able to innovate and innovate quickly is an important footnote for all of us. Where we're different is we're not a vaccine company. We're a monoclonal antibody company. And so our innovations are around that. So we work with passive immunity. Think about it the way that we all naturally receive antibodies, at birth from our mothers. And that's where our focus is. And, for us, as we look at what we're doing, our goal is to expand and think about different ways to protect populations, right? And so while vaccination is one modality, right, the important thing that we think about is how can we get a little bit more broad and do what patients, clinicians all are looking for, which is to expand the options that are available to them.
So this is just sort of a different route to a preventive approach in a way that, vaccines, obviously everyone has heard about, but maybe not as many people have heard about monoclonal antibodies and these other preventive approaches. Can you talk about how that works and sort of like how this is another avenue to vaccines?
Yeah, of course. I think what we think about it exactly, Lecia, is what is the way to immunity? And so I was at World Vaccine Congress in Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago, and was really pleased that there was an entire session around monoclonal antibodies, as well as the immunity that they can provide. It would not be a far stretch to think that at some point that conference may actually change its name to, World Immunization Congress. I don't know if they'd have to rebrand that, but I think, that's where we see it. So when you think about what happens with vaccination, it really hasn't changed a lot in the 300 years and since Jenner found our first vaccines out there. So what vaccines do, right, is they create an environment. And by the way, I'm not the chief scientific officer, chief commercial officer. So, for those of you who are scientifically focused, forgive me if I'm a bit off. But, what they do is they stimulate the body's own immune system to produce antibodies against the virus. Right. And that happens through an infectious process, whether it's, a micro infection, so to speak. Right. What then happens is antibodies are made after that exposure, which allows for the immune system to map out that virus. What also happens through that, though, is the infectious process leads to inflammation. And oftentimes through mimicking exposure to the virus, leads to sometimes you feeling a little bit down. Depending on the vaccine, there's other things that come with it. But, essentially that's it. What passive immunity with monoclonal antibodies is, right, is it's a monoclonal antibody that is targeted to deliver the end result of what you would get through the vaccination process. So kind of skipping that antigen antibody inflammatory cascade. And, the way we try to explain this a little bit broadly is it is the exact same thing that we all get from mom after we're born. Those are those antibodies that we get from that process. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a really interesting distinction. Achieving immunity doesn't always have to be through vaccines. As you mentioned, there's this other route that involves passive immunity. And kind of given the context around the political situation around vaccines currently, and maybe just the term immunization in general has been sort of politicized. Have you seen an impact, like not only just on your company given that, but also just the broader vaccine landscape?
I think we've seen an impact in politics from our Thanksgiving tables all the way through, I think, every facet of what we do in life. There was a really interesting, and you mentioned politics, so there was a really interesting poll that was conducted by Politico, and it actually just came out, and they looked around the lines of politics in red and blue, and the title of it was, for many Americans, the facts on vaccines remain unclear, and so they categorized, they asked 3 questions, and they categorized it by people who had voted for Donald Trump and people who had voted for Kamala Harris. And the first question they asked was, facts on vaccines are still up for debate, and it's damaging to enforce their uptake. Now, when they pool all of it, 46% of people agree with that. People who voted red, 54% have agreed with that, as well as 36% of the people who voted blue. And so you see that there's, I think, a opportunity for companies like us, but medicine in general, to do a better job of full education. The next question they asked, and there was only one more, so I'll end quickly, was that science on vaccines is clear and it's damaging to question it. And the totality was 39% of people said that it was clear, right? When you look at red voters, only 30% thought it was clear, and blue voters thought 52% was clear. But I think what you see is that through that middle area that everyone is driven to, right, there's a lot of confusion out there. And I think we see, that, spill into, not outside of our industry, just in general. And so, leadership and a clear voice, I think, is going to be remarkably helpful from societies and others.
Yeah, those are really great data points that you mentioned. And what do you think is going into that kind of confusion among the general public? I mean, because, during COVID, I feel like vaccines, people saw them as sort of like the savior of the pandemic. And then there was a bit of a switch afterwards where people began questioning vaccines. I guess, like, what is the industry maybe missing when it comes to clearing up some of that confusion and mistrust that we've been seeing so much in the last few years?
It's an interesting thought that we spend time here noodling on regularly. I think rather than focusing on, the trust or the mistrust in vaccines, what we tend to do is look at the behavior that is being exhibited and then try to address needs that way. And so, for me, one of my first lessons that I had in commercialization was market research. And, it was a really interesting study in that we asked a group of patients and clinicians before their appointment and then interviewed after the appointment. And what we really did was we asked them, like, what were you hoping to get from your visit with your doctor? And then we asked the clinicians, what are you hoping to achieve when you meet with your patients? And ultimately, what is important to each of you individually? After that 15-minute interaction, right, the appointment ended and we interviewed both the physician and then the patients as well. The clinicians actually gave themselves high marks, right? They said they did a great job, right? They met the agenda and they really believed that the patients understood what they're saying, where they're going. For me, as a first-time marketer in this role, only 1/3 of the patients actually reported that they were happy with that interaction. And so for me, I think we try to listen to what the market is telling us, what patients are telling us, and what behavior sets there are. So I say all of that because, an amazing study was done by the CDC. Amazing for two reasons. One, it was really well powered. And two, we didn't actually have to do it, which was, a substantial benefit for us across the board. So they looked at people who didn't take vaccines at large. And so they looked at people who chose not to take an RSV vaccine. They looked at people who chose not to take a flu vaccine. And then they looked at people who chose not to take a COVID vaccine. The number one reason why people did not take an RSV vaccine was they said, what's an RSV vaccine, right? Like what's the need and what do I need to do? And I think that's a set of circumstances that, those who are in that space are aware of. And I think they can, build towards that. The number one reason why people did not take a flu vaccine was actually they weren't worried about getting the flu, right? Where COVID stands out is the number one reason for not getting the COVID vaccine was they were concerned about serious or unknown side effects. Interestingly, the number 4 reason, because it was a 5-point scale, was mistrust or not trusting the government. And so I think we look at people's behavior and try to make sure that when we're communicating outward, that is always kind of top of mind. And that goes back to that, as I said, that first lesson that I've learned.
I love that you cited that CDC study because I love a good report like that. And I think those two reasons that most of the people provided for not taking a COVID vaccine are really important to note. This kind of fear of potential risks or side effects that they feel like aren't being communicated to them / not trusting the government. I think that's something that we're seeing a lot in the US right now. So what role does industry and companies like yours play in kind of addressing those concerns? And what do you think needs to happen to kind of close that gap?
Yeah, I think we can play our role, right? And we are, as I said, we're a small company here in New Haven. And, our goal is to create educational opportunities around what are monoclonal antibodies, what's the, how they work and the protection that they can provide across a host of viruses. I think where the industry, would do better is to take a minute to stop and listen and really understand where people are coming from. I think society has gotten to a point where, we talk to each other. If there's a disagreement, we talk louder. If there's still not disagreement, then we make a point or a decision that on that person's ability to comprehend and or intelligence. And I don't think that's fair. I think as you look at our country, people are largely rational and want what's best for themselves and their families. And so as we look at this, what we're doing is exactly that. We're trying to educate that there are alternatives out there. And there are monoclonal antibodies actually being used at scale. When you look at what's happening, against a respiratory virus at scale, babies and the neonates are actually being immunized against RSV. And so that doesn't come, I guess, with the same level of conversation or maybe, scrutiny. But what we're trying to say is these are very normal things. There is an alternative, right? Because the argument to date has been pretty binary. It's yes or no. And what we're trying to do is just bring back science and let people understand there are multiple different ways in which you can achieve immunity from different viruses. And our hope is that that the rest, I think, of science and industry is able to open the aperture a little bit and say, we agree it's not a one size solution, but there's multiple ways to do this.
For sure. And, I think Invivyd's perspective and angle on how you approach this would be slightly different from like a major vaccine maker like Moderna, for example, because obviously your route is different and you're kind of educating patients about a totally new route that they might not have heard of before and kind of like relatively novel science, I guess. So how do you go about kind of navigating that and ensuring people feel confident about their knowledge of the science and making sure you're addressing some of their fears?
Yeah, I think what we're really trying to do is be very, very plain in how we do it. So we've started reaching out and developed some campaigns. So we have some out-of-home digital media that we're doing just to talk about what's at stake when a virus impacts your family and your personal life. And, asking people to think about different options and different opportunities. I think one of the things that, we're really proud of, and I should have you talk to our Chief Communications Officer, Christy Kuhl, who is would be a really interesting person for you to get on your podcast. We started a campaign called Antibodies for Anybody and partnered with Lindsey Vonn with that. And I think what you see there is that through the lens of staying well and just being a remarkable competitor and someone that, we were all kind of holding our breath as she defied gravity and speed. Someone who really takes all aspects of training and health and wellness very seriously. I think we're trying to educate a little bit more broadly and a little bit differently. Brands typically look at the negative space, right? The disease state is the villain. The hero is the brand, right? And what that leads to is that, this treatment can achieve that. What we're trying to do is just talk to people about, preventing viral exposure and doing it a little bit differently.
Yeah, and that campaign just launched recently. Have you learned anything so far from it? I know it's been just a short amount of time, but any kind of takeaways from the campaign so far that you feel have gone really well or that you've learned from that you hope to kind of implement in the future?
Yeah, I think for me, the one thing I learned is that Lindsey Vonn is a remarkably strong person and just a total, someone that I admire their courage, their strength, and who they are. We're obviously, this is a brand new campaign and we're thrilled about where it's going and where it will go. And, certainly, as I said, you should have Christy on. I think she can give you a little bit more background on that.
Yeah, maybe she'll be our next guest.
Right. It's not a bad idea.
And, looking ahead to the future, you mentioned that there's all these new alternatives to for different routes around immunization. There's a lot of innovation happening in the space. What are you looking forward to in the space in general, and kind of what's next for Invivyd as well?
Whew. All right, that's a lot. What I'm most excited about is to continue to provide that innovation and that option and alternatives for patients and healthcare providers. As we look, at the landscape, the reality is that vaccination in certain populations can only take us so far. And so, it is actually sound and responsible medicine for us to innovate and provide different levels of immunity and different delivery systems. So, I think what I'm most excited about is, continuing to build out a commercial organization here, learn from patients and research and clinicians, and then continue to take on hard things. Why I came here was I wanted to do something challenging, and that's exactly what we're doing. So, beyond COVID, we've publicly released programs in measles and RSV, and I think we tend to be drawn to things that are a little bit more difficult and that people aren't doing, which makes, I think, every day a little bit exciting to drive into the office.
Absolutely. And, I think this conversation is on a topic that many marketers kind of stay up at night wondering about, how to rebuild public trust in science. And your perspective here is super valuable. And thank you again, Tim, for joining.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
So we at MM+M are known for giving out a lot of awards. We have our Pinnacle Awards, which are coming up at the end of the month. We have our 40 Under 40, which we had in February. We have Women of Distinction in June. And famously, we have our MM+M Awards in October. We give out a lot of awards. Now, on the other side, we get an award. We have the Neal Awards, which are known in the industry as the Pulitzers of B2B journalism. We enter them every year. Sometimes we've won in the past. Last year, we were up for a couple of awards and left empty-handed, but not this year. This year, we came home with hardware. We came home with best single issue of a magazine, one of the big awards for our Agency 100, the 2025 Agency 100. You're about to hear from me and Jameson at the Yale Club in New York City on Tuesday afternoon, mere minutes after the ceremony ended and we took home our award. You'll hear the exuberance that we have and obviously the passion that we have for Agency 100, which we are in the middle of. Agency 100 will be released on June 10th. So consider this a little sneak peek of what is to come, but very proud of not only myself and Jameson, but the rest of our team. And that goes for our entire editorial staff all the way through to all the other people that make this happen. We're at the Neal Awards and we won.
We did. We were nominated for 3 categories, and we won the one that I think was the most important one for us to win because it was a summation of months and months of hard work.
And I think it's fitting. So for those in our audience, we won for best single issue of a tabloid or magazine for the Agency 100, Jameson's first Agency 100, which I remember you last year being like, this is a lot of work. And they said that in the description for the winners.
The judges said, wow. What a massive issue and undertaking. Kudos on this.
Yeah, I mean, when I was interviewing to come to MM+M, the Agency 100 was the issue that sold me on this was a place that I wanted to be. I saw it. It was a sports-themed issue that year, and it just absolutely blew me away. And so to be a part of it here at Haymarket, here at MM+M, and take it to even higher levels and have it be recognized in the most prestigious way possible is definitely an incredibly cool moment for all of us here at MM+M.
And I was saying to you before we got recording that I've been here since 22, and I know that it's been nominated since I've been here beforehand. To see it win for the first time is very cool, and I do say that's a testament to your leadership as editor-in-chief because you want to take what was already a great product to that next level, and clearly they recognized it.
Yeah, and, I think there's so many people on our team that get credit for this. I mean, it's you, it's me, it's Lecia Bushak. It was Mark Iskowitz was still working on it last year. Here, Rick Raj, who, has moved on to, a different publication. Kevin Zitzman, Lisa Gill, Gordon Thaler, Sean Eiling, David Lee, Bill Fitzpatrick, our podcast producer, recorded so many podcasts related to the A100. Our entire commercial team for supporting us. Am I missing anybody? I feel like I named off a lot of people.
Our events team, just because they're our events team too. And it's you as well for winning for PR Week for the best podcast. He doesn't have a mic, so he can't contribute, but we'll sing his praises regardless.
Absolutely.
Just a great day for Haymarket. Him winning the award for PR Week, us winning for A100, campaign winning for best DEI coverage. So all of us got to go home with something, which is always nice.
And the fun thing is we're doing it all again right now, and it's going to be bigger and even better this year because we incorporated a power list of pharma partners. It's going to be close to 50 companies in addition to the A100 that we're going to be highlighting this year. We've got a chatbot coming. Can't think of anything else new, but that's enough.
New theme.
Theme.
People love the theme. They love the board games.
Video games this year.
They're going to love video games too. No, just such a great, what a better way to cap off a 4-hour ceremony at the Yale Club. than with this.
Yes, we were one of the last awards, but it was worth it.
It was absolutely worth it. So you're going to see plenty more of our A100 coverage, but had to at least drop a little bit into the podcast here because you should have seen our table celebrating. So, and you'll see us later at a bar celebrating too. So more to come on that. But yeah, congrats, Jameson. Congrats to the whole team.
Congrats back to you, Jack. Thanks.
I also want to give a special shout out to our friends over at PR Week. Our podcast producer, Fitz, turn on your mic. You won for Best Podcast.
That was a big win. Terrific staff. Obviously, Steve Barrett, the editorial director at PR Week, Frank Washkuch, the executive editor, Jess Ruderman. I could name them all. Jess Ruderman, Julia Walker, Diana Bradley,
Jeremy
Sodergren. Yeah, everybody is just fantastic journalists, so well-deserved. We're getting the message out to all the communicators. Necessary news that they need to listen to, and it's nice to be recognized.
Second time that you've been recognized, so congrats on that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good for myself as a producer to be a part of it. I'm extremely grateful.
And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Campaign also won for Best DEI coverage.
Yeah.
So each of us, it was nice because I was sitting there and you had won and then Campaign had won. And I was sitting there like, I would like an award. And then we won one of the big awards. As I mentioned, we have a lot of awards, but one of the other jewels of our events that we host throughout the year is our Transform Conference, where we focus on healthcare innovation, not only for medical marketing, but also the broader pharma and biotech landscape. There are a couple of conversations that we had off to the sidelines in between the different panels at Transform, so you're about to hear a couple of those. I hope you enjoy them.
I'm Karina Castagna, Chief Growth Officer at Flora Health.
And Ashwin Attri, CEO at Fluence.
So you were both on panels here today at Transform. Talk about, for those in the audience that weren't able to attend Transform, what did you talk about in your panel? What was the focus?
Yeah, our panel was all about how patient access is becoming even more critical. Historically, there's been a big focus on awareness and getting the doctor to write a script. And our focus was on, what happens after the prescription and how we get past the hurdles with technology and with, new legislation and trends happening in the patient access space.
What Karina made me talk about is where the technology is going, what are we looking forward to, how is AI actually transforming the way access is being brought further upstream, how pharma can do better solution design, and what are some of the implications of that for patients specifically? And how do we bring patients into that solution design with pharma? And what technology allows us to do that?
You talk about there being room for pharma to improve, and that's so much of what I cover just on a day-to-day basis as a reporter. What are some of those best practices in terms of being able to say, hey, here's maybe an area where we're not fully connecting with our target audience?
We really talked about this almost at length during the panel, is that it's way too confusing today. There are too many websites, there are too many apps, there are too many passwords, logins, usernames. Hubs have some stuff and SPs have some stuff and every brand has a different system. It's very confusing as a patient. Where am I in this process? I am actually lost. So with the advance of how the AI agentic world is moving, it really brings the power back to the patient to use these systems to understand where they are as part of this journey and how do you minimize the noise there is both for the physicians and the patients, but the chaos of so many places to go to find fragments of information can be solved, and that's what we're kind of marching towards with these systems, especially in the world of access, because it's complicated, a lot of different fragments of it, and this will really help.
Right. And in the world of access, it's like whack-a-mole. You solve for one problem, you solve for benefit investigation, PAs are a problem, you solve for prior authorizations, AFPs are the problem. It never ends. And so it's how do you use more technology to make it more seamless on the back end to get patients on therapy faster.
And I have to ask, obviously, the elephant in the room question, because I can't have a conversation in healthcare without bringing up AI. Is like, where does that factor into that additional use of technology? Like, where are the places where we can streamline or at least bring that innovation in and make a difference?
It's a very sexy elephant. It's actually a very, very functional elephant.
A big, sexy, functional elephant.
Big, sexy, functional elephant. I really think that we're at that point where in the last 15 years, a lot of technology has been worked on, and there's been a lot of promise that this is the next big thing. Hey, blockchain is going to solve everything. Hey, this new finagle thing is going to solve everything. But I really think the promise of AI to simplify the complexity is really powerful. And we're at a point where solutions are being built to really pay off on the promise, on the hard work that's been done on collecting big data. That was another big promise, right? Big data and analytics will solve everything. Compute power will solve everything. Cloud systems will solve everything. So we're at the point where all of these pieces are coming together with the final layer of AI being applied on top of it to really pay off that promise. And that's why it's a big, sexy elephant. A functional elephant.
A big, sexy, functional elephant. I've really appreciated you guys talking about like what was the biggest themes in your panel and stuff outside of your panel, just from the other panels that you've seen, people you've been talking to here. Like, are there any other themes that have emerged for you that you think our audience should keep in mind for those that weren't able to make it to Transform?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall AI was a big theme across the board, right? And different companies, agencies, partners, like everyone's trying to figure out AI. And we had another panelist we lost here, Arpan, and he made a comment. He said, "I'm a pharmacist and I like to solve small problems for me quickly and efficiently." And I think that's the starting point right now in healthcare. We're trying to solve problems quickly, efficiently, using AI, leveraging it. I hear everyone talked about AI, but there's question about what's real and what's coming. And so I think that the more people embrace it and adopt it and learn how to use it more effectively, the stronger and more efficient we will all be as pharma marketers.
Peter Friedman, Chairman and CEO of LiveWorld.
Peter, it's great to be able to have you on the show talk. You're just on a panel with Jameson. For those who weren't able to attend Transform, what'd you all talk about on the panel?
This was about AI and marketing. Is it happening? How fast? The challenges? Where do people have to go?
Where do people have to go? I was in there when they asked, and they're like, oh, do you think pharma's ahead? Do you think pharma's behind? People seem to be a little bit more on the behind side or just kind of keeping pace. But
yeah, well, actually, an interesting thing is when he asked, I said, you mean in marketing,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And broadly, the pharma industry tends to lag other industries. It's lagging here too, but this is moving so fast, the distance of lag is shorter because the pressure and the velocity is so high. I should have said that in the panel. That's an exclusive for the podcast.
Look at that.
But the other thing that struck me, which we didn't talk about, is if that question were about the pharma company overall and embracing the core of the science, they may be on the leading edge. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if we'll see something different this time than we saw with the internet and digital and social and even personal computers. Well, the fact that the pharma company's core is on the lead, will that drag the marketing faster?
Interesting.
That's just a question. It could.
So you're thinking about like that first company that's like, hey, we have the first ever like fully AI discovered, developed drug that's on the market. That could be kind of the inertia that brings the market with it.
We're seeing in some of our clients, because we get to know a lot, how they're using AI to make new things, different things, variations, test it faster, sort of diversify what it can do, make it better for more different people. They're into that. And I have to believe that halos to everybody else. Now, that may overcome the slowing inertia, that they have. There's regulatory. You're still going to need the executives to go, all right, look, I know we're regulated, but we got to move here or we're going to get left behind. And I think there'll be pressure on that because we see at every level of a company, all the way up to C-suite, concern to the freak out level of what about my job? Yeah. What about the whole company? Because this is a leveling of the playing field on every dimension that can enable a smaller company to take away their business or their jobs. So there's a lot of concern at every level. And I think if people help them and give them things they can do, there'll be more interest.
Do you share that concern, or is that something where you're like, I see the potential in this to be able to further optimize what we do from a workflow perspective?
For our company?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we're so all over AI and so much of an opportunity. I mean, my company are celebrating our 30th anniversary.
Congrats on that.
Okay. We're still here. Longest standing social media related company in the world. But we're small. So we've been great at last man standing and we deliver value. I'm very proud. We've mostly been profitable and our clients value what we do enough that they pay us more than it costs us. But we're small because we can't lose hundreds of millions of dollars. But we keep coming up with innovative things and that could grow. But market structure doesn't help. AI has leveled that field completely. I don't need hundreds of millions of dollars to introduce my new products. My developer group, which is small, I think it's more powerful than a big one. And they have harnessed and mastered AI. They're making stuff so fast, I'm out of breath just talking to them, and really innovative stuff. And I think it's giving us a bigger opportunity. But as I said in the panel, because we're adding more value. I mean, everybody's going, can you be more efficient? Can you be more efficient? Yeah, we'll do that. Look at this. Look at, you could do something you couldn't do before. You can understand your customers better. You can make more versions of the creative. We can develop the strategy on which the creative is based faster. Now, the actual creative, that's a little trickier, because if you want to be a real best practice, stellar, standout brand, and in every market, everything's too noisy, generic doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And on creative, AI is kind of generic.
Yeah.
But if you've got a great creative director, they have the opportunity to get the AI to do things that aren't generic.
I got to ask you one final question. Is like being here, and like obviously you're focused on the AI panel, but like we've had conversations about all sorts of different things that are, as the name suggests, transforming the medical marketing industry. You've been around for a while, seeing this industry rise, fall, contract, expand. What do you make of kind of the state of medical marketing? If you had to assess it in some sort of way, we're here, tomorrow's going to be April. Like, how do you assess where medical marketing stands right now? Is it healthy? Is it room for improvement? Like, what do you make of it?
There's lots of room for improvement. It's true for all industries. I think that the customers, the patients, the APPs, nurse practitioners, physicians, assistants, ACPs are increasingly a sort of magnetic nuclear force pulling pharma over the line to more consumer-centric marketing, more knowledge, more information, more transparency. And, I don't just want to know about your product, the drug or the device. I want to know what you're doing for my entire healthcare experience. And they're going to have to step up to that. And then, again, the AI can help. So I would say that, which was already going on, that's a really powerful force. And then you add the AI on top of that. And when they realize the AI is amplifying that, not just cost efficiencies, they're going to go. And some companies will and some won't. And the ones that do will win. And just like with me, the AI is leveling the playing field so I can go past people that I couldn't before. So will the pharma companies. Mm-hmm. So and you don't want to think of it as big company and small company. You want to think of it as small brand and big brand.
Yeah.
Because the small brand and the big pharma company is very, backwater. But they won't be now if they use this right.
Definitely. Peter, really appreciate you hopping on here for this conversation, and obviously wish you the best on the 30th anniversary and the next 30 years.
That's right. It's a good time to transform.
Absolutely. Thank you for tuning into this week's jam-packed episode of the MM+M podcast. I am so proud again of our entire team and all the work that they put together, and I hope this is just an encapsulation of all that we do on a day-to-day basis for you, the listener. We're going to be back next week with another exciting episode, so see you next week. The MM+M podcast is produced by Bill Fitzpatrick, Gordon Thaler, Lecia Bushak, and Jack O'Brien. Rate, review, and follow every episode wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to check out our website, mmm-online.com, for the top news stories on the pharmaceutical industry and medical marketing agencies.